So my name is David Bell, and I'm a longtime advertising junkie, and I'm a director of Dstillery, and I'm here with the president of Horizon Holdings, not just Horizon Media Agency, but Horizon Holdings, Bob Lohr.
Happy to be here, David.
And I've been looking forward to spending time with you since I got here on Saturday. So tell us about your journey. But before you do, I want everybody to understand that I had the chance to interview you for the president of AOL. And frankly, it was the best interview I ever had.
Oh, that's very nice.
You blew me away. Okay. So tell us how you got here, because it's a wonderful journey that brings you back to the advertising agency
Yeah.
business.
No, and David, and the work we did together at AOL was a lot of fun, and we really were transforming the industry back then around programmatic when that was actually happening. But as you know, I have a background in technology and made my way through Corning Glassworks and General Motors, but eventually into the media business with Razorfish and Avenue A. We sold that company to Publicis Group, get into the agency world, and it's sort of fundamentally, it was probably before anyone really was using technology or thinking about technology in the marketing and media landscape. So I was really new to the world of marketing and media, but you knew it was ripe for transformation at that point. I ended up leaving Publicis Group just as sort of the industry was embracing the idea of programmatic media buying, and went over to AOL, where you and I connected. And Tim Armstrong was running the company at the time. And we were just at that moment where technology got to the point where we were thinking that we could actually do buying in an automated fashion. And the thing I'm most proud of there is we built a platform called AOL One, competed in the market, and now we have almost $3.5 trillion being bought automatically in the industry. And after AOL, I decided to go and work at IBM, and I went back to my roots. Ginny Rometty was the CEO at the time, and I took a hiatus from the industry, about 10 years. And I have to say, that 10 years was probably the best education I've ever had back into technology. I felt like I was in a university again. I learned about quantum computing, I learned about large language models, I learned around data in ways that I wouldn't have done, cloud computing. And I stayed there, and I was just a sponge. And I was about to go sunset myself and got on boards and was lucky enough to get some advisory roles. And what I realized was what we had done in the software industry at IBM, and what I did with my supply chain practice and my asset management practice, and what software could do for industries. When I came back to the media and marketing landscape, I realized that it hadn't been done in marketing and media. And we have an opportunity here to automate and make the job of a marketer much simpler than ever before. And actually, the journey we're on with Bill Konigsberg at Horizon right now is to launch new innovative products for the marketer that allows their business to grow, not necessarily make the agency run faster. And there's a lot of dynamics around that. But I'm very, very excited about sort of the transformation, just like at AOL, that we're going through at Horizon.
Well, the Distillery people are very excited to be a partner to yours, and the fact that you guys are open to doing never-before things is really exciting.
Yeah, so there's one fundamental truth that I think I learned at IBM. In an open ecosystem, innovation is just accelerates. In a closed system, it stifles innovation. So the work we're doing with Dstillery in the open ecosystem, meaning that my platform is interoperable with what Dstillery is building. It's a composable architecture. We can leverage innovation together on behalf of the client is actually the magic. What's happened in the marketing and media landscape is other agencies have made billions of dollars of investment in technology and data. And the problem when you make billions of dollars of investments in old technology, even current technology, it gets old very quickly because the innovation cycles are so. So what's available to marketers today is old technology, old data sets, old infrastructure models, and they're being forced to do marketing in the old way versus we all know with LLMs and discovery engines that consumers have already moved on. So because consumers have already moved on, marketing has to do things very differently. And the types of data and information that Dstillery can give into my platform, Blue, allows me to move faster for my Capital One clients or for my Spectrum clients in ways that the old technology can't.
Beautiful. So, what things did you learn as an advertising seller that have helped you as you come back to the agency business?
Yeah, it's a very interesting question because I think, and you and I were in this generation, the advertising and marketing industry grew up around efficiency. The better I could do, the faster I could do things, the lower cost I could do things. And what happened maybe 30 years ago, we split up media and creative, right? And we said, you know what, we can buy bigger, we can have bigger scale, I can actually get a lower cost for my customer. And that train ran out of control, meaning that it was a race to the bottom. And a lot of the agencies that exist today, especially in the whole coast, have set benchmarks publicly about what they need to do from a profitability standpoint. That focus on profitability lost their sights on what the customer actually needs. And now, I think, as we did at AOL, you focused on the customer. What was the customer need? How do we actually meet that customer need, whether it was an ad sale, whether it was content on the HuffPo, whatever it may be, but we were always focused on the customer. And so I think the media agency landscape really drove the system in a way that was only about cost, not about actually providing value to the customer. Now, with new innovation cycles that are out, I can actually use new technology to create a better value exchange with the customer than I've ever done before. And I'm not encumbered by the old technology at Horizon. So we can innovate with a company like Dstillery or a company like Smartly and bring them into our ecosystem so that we have a really, really strong value proposition. And you know, we're also, with Dstillery, partnered with Newton Research. Newton Research is this phenomenal technology company out of Boston, and they're creating and experimenting with buying agents. So we're combining ourselves with Distillery's information, Newton buying agents, and our platform to do automated buying on behalf of our clients. And what that means is it's not necessarily doing the buying, but it's sorting through all the permutations and options I have across buying platforms and allowing me as the media buyer to actually execute on that. So it's an exciting time, and I laugh at this all the time because we're going back to the place where media and creative are going to come together, because the machines are going to allow us to iterate on creative just as much as we can iterate on media. So it's a really exciting time. The inertia, though, David, in the system is holding a lot of this back still.
So, two things came together in a really powerful way. Bill Koenigsberg was looking for a president for a long time.
Yeah.
Got close to a lot of people.
Yeah.
He brought you in as a consultant. He decided he wanted you. What made you decide you wanted Horizon? Because as a consultant, you got a real in-depth look.
Yeah. Well, you know, Bill is a very convincing salesperson in general. Bill has created a culture at Horizon that's pretty special. The value proposition, just so everyone who's listening here can hear it, is business is personal. And that resonated with me very, very much. It goes back to making sure that when I'm doing business with someone, I'm invested in who they are, and I'm making sure that their business is my primary focus. So Bill and I bonded on that very, very quickly. And then what I realized was that what Bill had been building with his identity system was very, very unique in market. Again, it was composable, it was open, it allowed clients to participate in it, and it was something that if we could just build, which we did in a very short time frame, a platform that could democratize access to that data, we had something that no one else had. And within a 6-month period, we launched the Blue platform and validated with a very, very big win in the US against our holdcos competitors that we did have something unique, and the platform won out. That only then decided to have more momentum, and that's when I joined, because there was real validation to me that we could fundamentally, for once and for all, change this industry for the good of the marketer. And I think that's where we are right now. You know, it's interesting because we've always said, you know, CMOs have half-lives. They can't hold a job. Remember that whole theme? Everyone was getting fired every 2 years. Well, the problem was you could never really give the marketer information so that they could be friends with the CFO. And I think now we're finally at the point where the marketer can show the business value that they're bringing to the business on an ongoing basis, and the CFO would be happy to give them more media dollars because the media dollars are working harder for them. And the technology is allowing us to do that. We need now the marketers to step up and say, I'm demanding transparency. I'm demanding price transparency. I'm demanding transparency in how audiences are being built. I'm demanding how things get done and executed. And they have a right to do that. They need to take that back. It's very easy, David, to write a check to Mark Zuckerberg at Meta.
Yeah.
It's very easy to do that, and you get results out the end. And I'm arguing on panels after panels. I not only want the results, but I want the transparency of how you got to those results.
All right, so let's talk about that.
Yeah.
You and I connect on that subject big time.
Yes.
Your piece in the Can Daily on transparency was
Yeah.
right on.
Thank you.
So let's talk about the elements of transparency
Yeah.
and how it impacts the big holdcos and how it's being practiced at Horizon.
Yeah. So I think fundamentally, Bill's premise for the last 35 years around buying transparency has always been a card that he's always played. So for any kind of discount he may get from a publisher or a big entity, he would always give that credit back to clients. That's something that the industry normally does not do, and that has won him a lot of business. But now when you add, not only do I have buying that I'm doing for clients, I'm actually developing technology for them. I'm buying data for them. I'm building audiences for them. At AOL, we used to call it the tech tax. The amount of working media dollars you have to spend on technology starts to explode also. So what I've done is I've just really leveraged Bill's philosophy around transparency and buying and extended it now into tell me your fees around data. What fees are you paying on getting that data? What fees are you getting when you're paying on a platform? What fees do I pay when I actually go get audiences? And oh, by the way, what are the fees I'm paying when I do principal-based buying? Okay, that's the other element. So there's no hidden agenda cost. We're in partnership with our client to provide them with transparency around all of those kinds of fees and how we do things together. One of the key things we've done with our platform is I'm giving clients hands-on keyboards. What does that mean? That means as an agency, I can't hide behind my PowerPoints anymore because the client is in the platform with me, so they see exactly what's happening on a campaign at the moment that I can see it. And that is a very different dynamic between the agency and the brand. It's very interesting. So when I was at IBM and I ran the supply chain practice, I had supply chain managers that were managing global shipping and coordination and logistics. And my supply chain manager could log on, find their ship in the South Seas of China, look at the container, and in the container, the SKU unit, and understand when the SKU unit was what product was there, and when it was going to show up in San Francisco, in a matter of an instance. But I still couldn't tell, in this industry, a marketer, how their campaign did yesterday. There's something wrong with that. The supply chain issue is much harder to solve than it is whether or not I know whether or not my campaign is working last week. So this idea of hands-on keyboard was to give marketers insights into what their campaigns were doing and collaborate with me to say, you know what, that campaign's not working. I think we should shut that off and we put this one on. I don't need to wait 6 weeks for a report to actually make the decision. My working media dollars are already spent. So the idea of hands-on keyboard is a really, really interesting component, I think, to transparency in this industry.
Transparency is the engine of trust, and trust is the lubricant of partnerships.
You're 100% right.
And when you allow your clients in
Yeah.
to the exact same thing that you have, it creates a partnership.
Yeah.
And you can both lift each other.
Yes. Yes. Well said.
But it's trust.
Yes, it is. And exposing yourself and opening yourself up to the client is threatening because they ask questions sometimes you don't know the answer to, and you have to say, I maybe don't know the answer, but let me find out for you. Yeah.
Every time the industry has moved toward non-transparency, it's paid a huge price.
Yeah.
The last time we paid the huge price was when the K2 study came out on the non-transparent trading desks.
Yes, right.
And I think we're headed there now.
I think you're right.
But I think Horizon is in a great place.
Yeah, I hope. I think there's a couple of dimensions. Transparency also, in my mind, David, is allowing the customer to own its data, right? There's one aspect to that if I do data work, they should own that data and that insight on their customer. But what's so interesting is because of where we are right now and how AI is helping us create insight models on top of that data, it's not really dashboards, it's insights. I know how the campaign worked. They should own the models on top of the data also, because the models are really their intellectual property that they should keep. So at Horizon, we're not only allowing them to keep the data, but we're also allowing them to keep the AI models that are developed on top of that, whether Horizon's is in that or not. Our competitors are not doing that. They're taking those models back into their agency, and they're using that on other clients because there's learnings to take. I fundamentally don't believe that that's right. And when you work with a Google or you work with an Amazon, the model insight that they develop on you is really, really important. And I think marketers need to demand that they not only own the data, but they also own the models that are developed on top, because that ultimately is their intellectual property and the way that they can outmaneuver their competition.
So you mentioned the split of media from creative.
Yeah.
Razorfish had both Avenue A and
Yeah.
Razorfish. And at the time, I was involved in RGA, and the only other firm that we thought was any good was Razorfish.
Yeah, thank you.
So you come from both creative and media.
Yeah.
And how are you bringing that creative mindset
Yeah.
to the media agency?
So I think when we think about creative, we have to think about it in really three components. There's the brand essence, the idea, the big idea. Who created the Marlboro Man? Like the really, really like insightful brand idea. I don't think that changes in this world. I think the essence of human creativity is always going to be there. What I do think changes, though, once that idea is done, the second phase is all about assembly and distribution. And machines can do that much faster than any kind of human can do at this point. And that's a very expensive. So when you think about 15-second spots, 30-second spots, what they look like, and because there's so many platforms and so many distribution channels, you need machines to do that. And then the third area that I think we need to sharpen our pencil on is creative scoring. And when you get into creative scoring, you now can match that to media. And that's where the two wheels come together. So the better that I can actually do the distribution, because we know for years, I can find a David Bell, I know what he's doing, I know what his behaviors are, I know who he is, and I would know what he's after. I can find you. What I haven't been able to do, though, is make a differentiation between David and Bob Lord, my creative. And what the value exchange for me is probably different than the value exchange for you. And the brands, we need machines to help us iterate on the creative so I know what works best and what doesn't work well. And I think that's where we are right now. It's actually a very exciting time. We've actually partnered with a couple companies, one called VidMob, one called Smartly, another one called Cartel AI. And those companies are just changing the way people think about creative. There's a lot of resistance in the creative world to change that, but I do think that's a very, very big unlock for marketers.
So if you had to give some advice to a young person entering our business today, what would it be?
Oh, God. I think my biggest piece of advice right now is lean in hard to understand how to use AI engines as a partner. And I think when the internet came out, people were kind of resistant. I never even thought Priceline. I never thought people would buy goods online, right? I was wrong. But I leaned into it. You need to lean into AI. You need to experiment with it. You need to have a second terminal where you have either ChatGPT or Claude on the side and use it as a thought partner. It's there to assist you. It's not going to take your job over. And what's interesting to me is actually the new hires we're even getting at Horizon are already doing that. So I think their jobs are going to change. They're not going to be mundane, boring jobs. They're not going to be reconciling spreadsheets anymore. They're going to be adding value to our clients faster than ever before. And I would just embrace sort of these new AI tools and these innovations that are happening out there in ways that I can't even imagine them to do. But they have to have an open mindset, and they have to be intellectually curious, and they have to really want to change the world. And I do believe that these tools will change the world.
Bob Lord, I'm glad you're back in the business. I'm glad you're at Horizon. And I'm even more glad that I get to spend time with you.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for sharing.
Thank you, David. Thank you so much. Pleasure being here with you again.